Hello and welcome to another End User Talk podcast. I'm your hostess, Jameelah, your lady in tech. Hello and welcome to the End User Talk podcast. I am your host, Jameelah, and as usual, we have another engaging discussion to have. I want to introduce our guest, Juan. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I do appreciate it. Before we get started, how are you doing today?
Doing really good. It's storming over here in Tony, Alabama. That's where I live at, over here in the country.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, I hope hopefully it's not too dramatic of a storm, and you all are safe. But again, thank you for accepting the invitation. I'm excited to have this discussion with you. But for those listeners who may not be aware of who you are, do you mind giving us an introduction of yourself before we get started?
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for inviting me on here. So my name is Juan Zapata. I am an immigrant to the U.S. I was brought here illegally when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And then through a lucky set of circumstances, when I was 16, I obtained legal documentation. I graduated high school, and then I went to Alabama A&M University and HBCU. Very excellent school, by the way. And I just grew up here in the South in Alabama, around the Huntsville, Madison, Harvest area. That's a brief summary. Other than that, I'm on TikTok as Arid American, and I have a published sci-fi novel. It's called Golden Skies.
That is definitely a very interesting intro and beginnings here for you starting very young in the United States here. Can you give us just a little bit more background on just your entrance here and your experiences and everything that pretty much, so I see you're also a published author as well, but all of those things leading up to you, your published pieces and just your experience here.
So experience here was good, but I didn't realize I was undocumented until I was like about 7 or 8 years old. And the reason I found that out was because I used to go to school down in the Huntsville City school system near Ridgecrest Elementary. And the reason I found out I was undocumented was one time I was watching the news with my parents, and there was like a judge, like a white man, talking on the TV. And he started mentioning like illegal aliens. And when I was a child back then, I loved aliens because I thought they were real. Well, I think they may be real anyways. But anyways, he was talking about that. So I started freaking out because I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I would always tell my parents that, oh, yeah, aliens are real. And I started pointing at the TV and I got all excited. And they told me to shut up, that they were talking about us. And that's I was like, what do you mean they're talking about us? And they had to explain things to me. So when I was young, that's when I realized that I wasn't the same as other people around me because of the documentation. Like I remember there was like fairs or certain events held on the Arsenal at Redstone, and my classmates were able to go and have fun and stuff. And I always wanted to go to these events, but my parents they could never take me onto the Arsenal because it's a military base, and obviously they asked for identification, and I didn't have any, and they didn't have any. So it was like things like that I grew up with, where I was like, I didn't have the same opportunities as everybody around me. I remember in 5th grade, I wanted to go to some trip to Washington, D.C., but there was no way they were going to let me in the White House because I didn't have a social security number. And, you had to provide that as part of the field trip. So it's just like little things like that, like little barriers that always got in the way. And I started facing them since the age of like 9, 10 years old. And I noticed things were wrong. But growing up, other than that, I went to middle school here in the Harvest area. And then I went to high school in the Harvest area. And there was hardly any Mexicans or Hispanic people, so I kind of felt a little isolated in a way. And I always felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. And there were lots of white students and there were some black students, but it was mostly white students in these schools. And I did face a whole lot of racism growing up. That was a barrier that I had to face, like the name calling, like the insults, things like that, which, had a negative effect on my identity, like my perception for being Mexican. Like I just felt ashamed about it, right, for the longest time. And I worked through that over the years. I definitely let that go as an adult, but growing up that way, it did affect me negatively. So that's some about how I grew up. And then ultimately in high school, I chose to go to Alabama A&M, but I'll expand more on that. With the writing, I started writing when I was 10. The reason I started writing is because I just like to write little fan fictions. Like I remember I liked the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, and I thought the sequel was taking forever to come out. So I just got on like a word, like a notepad program on the computer, and I just started typing what I thought would happen. And so that's where it started. And then I started writing like little stories on a piece of paper, like in fifth grade, like in my class, and I'd show it to my teacher, and she'd like just give me a little bit of feedback. And then I read this fantasy fiction series called like the Percy Jackson series. I really liked it, so then I started writing fan fictions of what I wanted the characters to do. And then I showed it to my friends, and they started encouraging me, and they were really supportive. And so that's how throughout that entire time I was like writing like little projects and little things that I wanted. And eventually in high school, I wanted to get a novel published, and I wrote a sci-fi book. And I tried in high school, but it wasn't good enough. My abilities weren't strong enough then, and it got rejected like a bunch of times. So it just didn't work out. And I still have that novel. It's like shelved. But and then later on, I wrote the novel that got published, which was Golden Skies. And I had some elements from my previous novel into that novel, but it was a fresher idea and it was different. And I wrote that when I was at Alabama A&M, and I got it published as a junior at Alabama A&M.
Well, despite your humble beginnings, and as a child, going through, from your childhood to teenage years to adulthood, we go through so many different changes, and we're faced through so many different obstacles and such. But to add on, this thing where you feel separate, or you feel, you use the word isolated because of your peers in class. There weren't as many Mexican Americans, and then having just a majority of the students be white, having to battle your own identity, as a, teenager young man. And then you're having to deal with this thing about your race, your identity. Those are a lot of things to try to deal with. To me personally, we really wish that, I really wish that our culture, our upbringing, our background weren't so put up as such an obstacle, or things that we have to explain, things that we have to try to find pride in or hide even, because you have so many other things to tackle. But I
Yeah.
am glad to hear that through all of those challenges, you were able to not feel a sense of shame, or continue to feel shame, or continue to try to hide who it is you truly are. And you've now embraced that. So many people don't come out with that type of
Yeah, you're right with that. I see a lot of people, they let it negatively affect them to the point where, at least with my own people that I've seen, you'll have people that will reject like Hispanic or Mexican culture because they feel ashamed of it and they just want nothing to do with it. And I don't judge those people harshly at all, because I was one of those people when I was in high school. I felt ashamed. Like I thought, being called Mexican, I had some people call me Mexican and didn't laugh about it, as if it was like a slur, like it was an insult. So I understand why people feel that way, but I'm glad I, progressed past that feeling of shame, and I let that go, and I looked inward, and I tried to look at the beauty within what is Mexican culture, right? What does that mean? Like what are the good things in that culture? Like besides like people wanting to stereotype us negatively and things like that. So, but I definitely agree with you. Like there are people that are unfortunately still stuck in that feelings of shame, but that's because of a lot of the hardship that they had to go through.
And, I'm a Black woman, African American, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of parallels between the Mexican community and the Black community. Really, might as well just say that a lot of non-white communities have parallels. We all suffer some of the same isolation, the same criticisms, from being called lazy, from being called not wanting to work, not wanting a quality or better life. And, kind of, pushed to the side, or given these, when it comes to income or employment and education, we're kind of pushed to the corner, or given, scraps even, because there's this sense that these people aren't at a level of understanding, they can't learn. They're unable to keep up. It would be a disservice to put them in this particular crowd because they hold everyone else down. As Black Americans, we kind of go through some of the same things, a lot of the same things and attacks. And it is discouraging when you know that that is not you. And then you're looking at TV or you're hearing these conversations, and all of these people are kind of painting you and your people, your culture as, negatives or things to be fearful of or things to stay away from. You can kind of feel like, well, I mean, what's so bad about me? What's so bad about us? I don't feel that way, and trying to fight and prove on a daily basis, day in and day out, why you deserve better, why you matter, and all of those things. It does get exhausting.
No, definitely. It's extremely exhausting. And you mentioned like media perception. That's a huge one. And there's a lot of parallels between the Hispanic community and the Black community, but definitely that's also one shown. And now it's changing lately. I see, of course, with more representation, like in movies like Marvel, for example. But in the past, growing up, let's say 2010, around that time, everything you saw about Hispanics or Mexicans specifically was like negative on the news. It was about illegal immigration, or it's like they're criminals, or it's like, or if we were in movies, we were always really stereotyped. Like we're always like fat or out of shape or like lame. And so it's like little things like that. It's like, I guess maybe to somebody that's white, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but that imprint has an effect subconsciously on people. And if they see that all the time, that's what they're going to perceive. That's what they're going to think subconsciously, or that's the first thing that's going to come into their mind when they look at that ethnic group. And so that has a huge effect on society.
You know what it does because, as most of us have sat around TVs, majority of the time before the internet became a big thing.
Yeah.
And, the people who weren't outdoorsy, you sat in front of the TV. In most households, that was where, you had your family time. That was where you found out information. And then you're correct to see these images of yourself or images of your people, your family even. And these images are not flattering. They're, man, they're kind of, they're alarming. And you look at each other and you're like, well, we're not like that. My parents work hard. They contribute to community, the economy. They are even doing their best to make certain that I, am not struggling and that I have, things and I'm not feeling too left out. Most people, if you talk to people who struggled, they didn't even realize that they were struggling. They were eating. They had a roof over their heads. They had clothes. Those things didn't occur to them until either they got older or they went outside of their homes and other people would tell them that, oh, you're not up to par, or that's not the thing that we wear. So it's like you have this
Yeah.
battle, and it's wild, but you're correct in that media has painted an image of, the best way for me to say it is, any individual who is considered non-white. The media never really portrays us in a fashion that is supportive or as contributors. We're always portrayed in these comical, disgraceful, and as you stated, criminals. We're portrayed as criminals. We're portrayed as lazy. We're portrayed as thieves. Nothing ever showing the true ingenuity behind us and how we contribute to society, to culture, and everything. So it does become discouraging. And I, too, just like you, can see where individuals would feel ashamed of who they are and try to hide it or claim to be something else or overshadow it so that they don't have to always live under that umbrella.
Definitely. Definitely. That's also where some people like, at least I've seen it in my community, where they try to, assimilate a whole lot into how other white Americans are, and they try to copy that as much as possible. And it's like, and it's sad to watch because sometimes it's like, that's not truly who you are, but you're just trying so hard, to fit into something that you're not.
That's the thing that becomes the standard, though. That is the American dream. That is what has attracted everyone from most cultures who not been born in the United States. That's what attracts people to come over here, is because we're sold, this idea you have to live this way. They've painted it as this is the road to success. This is the road to accountability. And so most people will come here and generally you find out really quick it's not what it's cracked up to be, because one, you're not given a fair playing field. You're not given the opportunity to live a quality of life that they portrayed in pictures and images and in television series because of the differences. But, as most of us have done, we have overcome or done the best that we can to overcome the stereotypes, and we have excelled. And that's what's going to lead me to the next discussion here in talking about your experience, getting out of high school. And when you're in high school, if you don't have it figured out about what it is you want to be when you grow up, the other challenges, before I get to that point, there's a little bit more school that I have to go to. You've got the challenge of trying to decide, what college or university am I going to go to? Am I going to go to college or university? Well, if I do, can I afford it? So you made the decision or had the opportunity to go to school. And as you mentioned earlier, you chose an HBCU. Let's talk about that. What was the trajectory and how did that happen for you?
So, the whole college thing was hard on me because I didn't have anybody in my family that had any experience with that. I was the oldest son, right? And so, sometimes I wished I had had an older brother that could have told me, "Hey, do X, Y, and Z. This is exactly what you need to do to succeed." I didn't have that, so I had to figure that whole college thing out myself and navigate it. My parents were no help because they, of course, we had disimmigrated, so they didn't know anything about that process. So that was hard. And, as I was looking at the cost of attendance, like the scholarship stuff, and then I also had the problem that I was, and my status at the time was I had a visa. So I wasn't a permanent resident, which is, it's commonly known as a green card holder. A lot of places, and even certain scholarships, a lot of scholarships back then require that you be at least a green card holder to even obtain those scholarships. So I had another barrier in place with that. So I was looking at the cost of attendance at a lot of universities, and I was realizing that a lot of this was, pretty hard to pay for. And I was like, and I also noticed that, a lot of the 50% of these costs are also room and board is also something I noticed as I was like just looking at options. Right. And, I did apply for several scholarships. I applied to a couple local universities. I applied for some that were out of state. And I tried for this college match scholarship. I tried to do that as well. And I got my ACT score up pretty high, but originally it wasn't that high. It was like, I think at first I got like a 23. I got a 23, which is not it's a good score. It's a decent score. But if you want to get like big scholarships, you need way higher than that. And I took some private classes because my mom was able to pay for them at a place called Appleton. And then I just adjusted some strategies. Like I started, instead of trying to like focus on my weaknesses, which was like math and science. I've always been good with English and reading and stuff like that, but not the STEM stuff, unfortunately. I wish it was the other way around, but that's just not been me. I started focusing on the strengths. I was like, because at first I was trying to do better at math and science, but then, I don't know, it just wasn't clicking so much. And then I just tried something else on the ACT where I was like, okay, what if I just really overkill on the English and reading, and because I'm already naturally good at those, and I just try to do perfect on those. And so when I did that, I got a 28 because this is how lopsided the scores were. The English was 33, the reading was 32, the science was 26, and the math was 22. So that the only thing that carried me to such a high score was really the English and the reading. But once I got the 28, I realized that because I was looking through the scholarships, and I was looking at Alabama A&M because it's a local university. I realized that I could qualify for the presidential, which that was one thing you discovered me, I believe, from that TikTok video. One thing, like I guess one misconception in the comments, or maybe it's not a misconception, maybe it depends on the HBCU, but there were some people that thought I only got the scholarship because I was like Latino, but the presidential scholarship was just an academic merit-based scholarship as far as I was aware. and it just required a minimum of a 28 on the ACT and a 3.75 GPA in high school. So I had the 28. Thank God I got that. But the GPA I had a 3.9. So I was able to qualify, and Alabama A&M offered me the scholarship, and I was really, really, amazed that I was able to get it. I was really, really happy to be able to get that because I just saw it as like the perfect opportunity, the key to be able to pave the future and not be in a whole lot of debt. And I didn't want my parents to have to pay any money because my parents had already sacrificed a whole lot throughout the years that, an immigrant family, right? And I was like, and I had two other brothers, and I know they eventually would have to go to college. So I was like, I didn't want to have to burden them with my problems. Is how I kind of took it. They didn't see it that way. I mean, obviously, like that I was a burden, but I felt like if I couldn't pay or figure it out myself, I would be a burden to my parents. So I was just really happy to have that opportunity with Alabama A&M. And then I went and toured the campus, and I really liked it. And I also liked the fact that it was local because, since I got the full ride, I could get out of my parents' house in the sense that I just wanted some freedom because I was like about to be 18. I just wanted to get out of the house. And so I was like, that would be excellent. But then if I wanted to go back home for whatever reason, or I just needed help or anything, like my parents would be 30 minutes away. So no big deal. And then I had a bunch of local friends that that weren't going to go out of town for their college because there's a couple colleges in Huntsville. And so I also saw it as a plus, as in like, I still have some other local friends I can hang out with as well, so I won't be having to start from zero, like at a fresh new place, I can, and I know the city and everything. So I just thought it'd be good. Like I thought it was a really good opportunity, and they were offering the major that I wanted. And the major that I wanted was just criminal justice. And the reason for that is because growing up, I didn't necessarily have a bad perception of the police. I only had a good perception because of my experiences. So growing up, like my mom was a victim of domestic violence, and there was another matter where the police helped me. But basically, because of those experiences where I saw that they were like helping my mom and they helped me, I had a positive outlook on the police. So I just wanted to like be a good police officer back then. That's what I wanted. Oh, I wanted to go into the FBI, but first, you kind of have to take your steps, right? So I wanted to be like a good police officer, and I saw criminal justice as a cool degree because I was like, okay, it's like, I'm already interested in this. And and you can also do other things with the degree too. It's not just necessarily police work that you have to do with it. So that's why I went to Alabama A&M because, what my main concern was like just being able to even attend the university. And another thing I forgot to mention was, like I said, I kind of briefly mentioned it was a lot of universities have those scholarship requirements, and they required you to be a permanent resident. But I don't know why, but for whatever reason, Alabama A&M, in their scholarship requirements, they only asked you to be a U.S. resident. They use that specific wording. They didn't say permanent resident. Had they put the word permanent, I would have been disqualified because I didn't have a green card. But since they just said resident, well, I was there on a visa, so I completely qualified for that scholarship. So that was another thing that I was like, I thought it was like the holy grail. I was like, I can't believe it. Here's a huge scholarship, and they're not disqualifying me because I don't have a green card. So that was another reason I also went to A&M.
Juan, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm really glad that I came across your TikTok. Um, One reason is because you said a lot of things that I'm a mother of three daughters. I tried three times and struck out. I did not get a boy. I don't have a son, but I have three daughters. And as a mother of three daughters, that's the one thing that I think our children don't understand is you use this word burden.
Right.
Children, in most cases, when you have considerate children, that's what they always feel is this sense of leaving a burden upon their parent or parents, whether that's a financial burden or whether that's a burden of, behavior, getting in trouble, causing your parents more hardships than, life is naturally going to put on us. And I really I love the fact that you're considerate. You were the oldest of your two other brothers, your two other siblings, and there was a lot that you had to try to navigate on your own just because you've been thinking about your future. It seems like for a very long time, since the age of 10, starting picking up the app and writing in your first attempt at writing a novel or a book and telling your story. You've been thinking about your future for a very long time. And the fact that you also were thinking about, I don't want to leave any extra burden upon my family or my siblings. You've also been trying to be a positive example, which is another falsehood that they say about Mexican Americans is they don't, they're, again, it leads to all negativity. They're not educated enough. They don't have the tools, the knowledge, the desire to do better. And you're proving all of that to be wrong. You were carefully, when you got to the age and considering what you needed to do in order to go to college, you made sure your test scores, I mean, you were very, oh man, precise in trying to figure out, how can I do this thing so that I can do these other things and leave the least amount of hardship on my parents and my siblings. And I want to applaud you for doing that, but I also want to say, and anyone who will be listening to this, is don't think that you are a burden upon your parents. I'll say this much to you. If you are, your parent will tell you. First and foremost, they're going to tell you, you are a burden. Believe me, if you have good, considerate parents as well, they're going to let you know. But the one
Definitely.
thing, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I just, you touching on that reminded me of this memory I had. It was like, I think it was sophomore year at the university, and like I just completed it, and I was back home during the summer, and I forgot what my dad was having me do. But you basically, I think I told him something along the lines of like, yeah, I'll do this, this, and this, and then I'll get out of your hair. You know, I think I was referencing how I'd go back to the university, and I told him, I was like, that way I can stop being a burden to you guys. And then he like just started tearing up, and he's like, when did I ever say you were a burden? So like we both, you know, it was kind of an emotional moment, but yeah, that just kind of resurfaced now that you mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the reality of it. But you know what brings a parent pride is the fact that you work so hard to make life better for yourself. Mind you, your parents came here to make life better for you. And it's almost subconscious. It's not necessarily spoken. I'm trying to make things better for you. That's why we moved here. It's everything that they've done. It's the jobs that they've taken where they're working long hours. They're coming home late, but you still have all of your basic necessities to make certain that you don't have to feel like I've got to help my parents. You're able to be a child. You're able to go to school and study, and your parents are able to do the things that they need to do because you're doing what you need to do. That's what brings a parent, because you get it. You know what I mean? You get what the ultimate goal was. We are here to try to make things better for you because we believe that you'll have a better opportunity. Even if I don't think I will, I'm going to make certain that you don't have to struggle. And the fact that you figured it out and you have been trying to make things better. Yes, it is a struggle and it's very challenging to be the first. And it's also scary. You had to figure all of this out, and your parents didn't know. Shoot, people who have been born here don't even know all of these tools and these resources that are out here. But you did exactly what you needed to do, and look at how it worked out for you. So, I mean, hats off to you. And I'm proud of you, just coming as a parent. That's what we want to, see our children blossom like that. That's what puts a smile on our face,
No, I
is to
really, really
see you
appreciate
do
it.
it. Oh, you are so welcome. Someone else needs to hear this story because someone else is going through this. And unfortunately, the political climate that we're in and just all of the ugliness that's being, there's a lot of attacks that are being put upon us. I'll say both of our communities. We've got, they said Texas is building what is it, a barrier with I can't think of what it's called right now, but in the water to keep um, people from crossing the border. But it's a hazard. It's killing people.
Yeah,
And
right.
with barbed wire, that's what it is. That's what I was looking for. They're putting those barbed wire perimeters. They can't get the wall built, so they're coming with other opportunities. But it's killing people. And we've got all of these attacks against. Well, now we don't have affirmative action. And if the truth was really and truly told, affirmative action, yes, we have to go back to why it was implemented. It was implemented because Black Americans were not ever considered to be given an opportunity to go to school under the normal statutes that were set up. They didn't want to give us those opportunities. So they had to write into policy to tell people, hey, let these people in. They deserve an opportunity. But affirmative action did not keep your grades up, did not keep your attendance. All the things and all the work that you had to do in order to stay in attendance in those colleges and universities, you, the individual, had to do it.
Right.
So
Definitely.
to say that someone, oh, you're only here because you're diversity hire or because you're on affirmative action, nobody did my homework for me. And in
Right.
order for
Yeah.
me to keep the scholarship or what the grant, I had to keep my GPA up. There's still work there. And that just blows my mind that people want to lean on that lazy excuse. And if you look at the numbers, Black people were not the primary users or benefactors of affirmative action.
Oh, out of curiosity, who was more the beneficiary for it?
White women.
White women. Oh,
Hmm. And it's just the same numbers and facts can be found about food stamps or AFDC. White people used it more than any other race.
yeah.
Nobody ever tells you that though. And you can research it for yourself if you think that I'm just, trying to favor my community, but numbers are numbers and facts are facts. And people, we are not lazy. We have not been lazy. We've worked for everything. We've contributed in major ways, and we do deserve to be here. And yeah, so I definitely want to applaud you because you touched on so many things, and I know that there's so many people out there who are just, we're all just trying to make it, right? We're all just trying to better ourselves, and going to school, going to college is, just the cherry on the top of that. Those accomplishments that we make once we graduate from high school and we get our diploma. The next goal is to get a degree because, hey, we want to now it's time to start making money and taking care of myself. Now, you said you were getting the criminal justice degree. Did you stick with that degree or did it actually change for you?
I ended up sticking with it, and I ended up getting it. However, I ended up at a different place wise than I would have thought. It's kind of funny, but so what happened is I graduated with it with a criminal justice degree, and at first I couldn't, let's say, apply to any police department, any old police department, because I was only a green card holder then. So I finally did have that permanent residency, that like the green card, but most of the police departments would not take a person with that. You'd have to be a citizen. So what I did is I tried out of state, because there's some places that would hire a green card holder, like Burlington, Vermont, like Grand Junction, Colorado, Arvada, Colorado, and I tried at these places while I was working just like a regular like security guard job. It was like a contractor job, right? Almost like a temp. But I was just trying to work full time and then just whenever I could just fly out and try at these places and see if I could get on with one of them. But the processes are really long, and they're they just have a lot of obstacles in the processes. So I got like the first one I didn't make it because of like some runtime, but they had like a stricter runtime than other places. And the other place I got to the interview, but it was an oral board with like 5 people there, and I'd never been in an interview with 5 people questioning me, so I like didn't do that well, and so I didn't proceed. And then in Grand Junction, I went all the way to the very end, but they just had like a random, like, I'll go ahead and just state this. They had a random like psych exam, and they were like, "Oh, well, you can't handle stress according to our findings." So like they're, even though I had like interviewed and rocked the interviews with like the 5 people and like with the chief, and I passed all their tests and everything, like they had so many steps. They were like, "Oh, you can't handle stress." So like, which I disagreed with heavily. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think that's the reason why you guys are like denying me." I don't know. I thought it was odd. Like, not to throw too much flack, but like I just thought it was just odd that I got that. And there was another person that was a green card holder, and his name, well, I'll leave his name out, but he was a black guy. And he was also from Georgia, and he was trying out in Grand Junction, but we both got told the exact same reason. So I thought that was just weird that we would both get disqualified for the exact same reason. I'm like, what's the chance of that? So I don't know.
We understand. Yeah. We know why.
But yeah, I went back to Alabama, and after that I chose to join the Army Reserves because I knew I could accelerate my citizenship. Like with the green card, I could become a citizen faster with that. So I did the Army Reserves, and I passed all the training, and I'm a soldier now, like in the Army Reserve. So that's why I think that's another reason why I think that whole psych exam excuse was pure BS. Because it's like, okay, if I can't handle stress, then how did I get through all this military training? How does that make sense? So
It's right. I mean, and see, this is exactly what I'm saying. You have so many hoops that you need to jump through, so many obstacles. That is why legislation, laws, and policy have to be extended and put into place for people like ourselves. Is because the people that are before you, when they see your application come through, let's just say they can't tell by your name that you're non-white. They call you in. Now they can look at you. And then at this point, it's them that decide whether or not you deserve to receive this position. That's
yeah,
how things are so unfair. And that's what we're talking about. And that's exactly why those particular rules, that's why things like that have to be put in place, because even though you earn it, even though you've passed the test with flying colors, someone's opinion of you is what can keep you from being able to compete or be given the opportunity. That is what is unfair.
yeah,
Your community experiences it, and my community experiences it. And that's why it is so important for us, because we're constantly judged. We're constantly denied things that we deserve, things that we've worked for. And you keep getting told no when you know, man, I am the best person for this. I am qualified. Look, there is no reason that you should deny me access.
yeah, definitely.
You get discouraged. And that's why it's important for us not to have this fighting against one another, and helping the powers that be continue to, make it look like we're the enemy. They're the ones who are putting up this smoke screen saying this community they don't pull their own weight. That other community doesn't either. But you know what? We're going to pit them against each other. We're going to say all of this stuff. We're going to pit them against each other so that they don't get to see what it is we're really and truly trying to do. We don't care for either community, but
Yeah,
we care for this community a little bit more because we feel like if we were to give them a leg up, they would knock us off of our pedestal. So let's make them all fight each other. And then we can stay where we are, and we can continue to do the things that we're doing and sliding people. And then we use our little slider and we determine, oh, we'll let a Mexican American, we'll let an Asian American, we'll let, to kind of look like we're sliding the bars and making things change. And if our communities don't stand up and talk back to them and fight them on the things that they're doing, today they're fighting African American history. Florida passed that bill that says they're going to say that slavery was a way for Black people they use the term better themselves.
Oh my God, Jesus.
You, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's a community that will buy that and they'll support that. Well, that doesn't make me feel guilty. I don't feel so bad about slavery. They instituted slavery to help them be better people. Come on. But if they can do that to African history, or just the history of the United States, who else's history are they going to whitewash?
Yeah,
You've got
that's
Asian
true.
American. I mean, and that's people are saying that's a black issue. It is not a black issue. It's a black issue right now, but it'll be your community's history that they start scrubbing and making like what they did with what Disney did with Pocahontas. I
Yeah.
loved watching Pocahontas when my girls were young, but I didn't know the true story. And that is not a happy story. So, but that's why we have to stand up. But I want to, we're winding down on our interview and there's so much I would love to learn from you. But what I want to do at this point is I want people to listen to the determination that you have. And I don't want to say had because you still have this, but your determination that led you to where you are now. You can do, for the most part, anything that you want to do if you put in the work. You did the research. You found ways in order to keep your status, your citizenship status did not gridlock you. You found ways, and might as well say loopholes. You found ways in order to get yourself where you needed to go to get into college, to accept the scholarship that paid your tuition, to end up getting the career that you are working now. You found ways and you went above and beyond in order to excel. So, for those individuals out there who say that Mexican Americans are lazy and that they don't want better, they're just criminals, they don't add to society, your story, the accounts in your journey says otherwise. You are first generation to be able to go to college. You've set an example within your intermediate family and in just your family as a whole. If they need a positive example, they can look at you and your pattern and see that. Sure, their journey is going to be different, but it just takes you to research, to talk. You have access to the internet. You also have access to people who are willing to share information. So, what I want to get from you is your journey is unique, it is different, but you still got to the ultimate goal. If you had advice to give any Mexican American whose upbringing is similar to yours, they aren't citizens, but they want to accomplish their goal, what advice do you have for them now that you've kind of gone through it on your own? What advice can you give them?
The advice I'd give them is, first of all, I would tell them that they're valid and to never feel like they should be ashamed of who they are and where they come from. Never be ashamed of their culture or to speak their language, and that it's all beautiful things, you know. And there are people that appreciate it. Just because they've run into a couple of white people that hate them doesn't mean that everybody hates them. And so I'd want to tell them that first, because of course, you know, if you don't have a good foundation, if you don't feel good about yourself, you don't have a good self-esteem, that's going to hinder you, right? So I would say that. The second thing I would say is to just, you know, to consult with some immigration lawyers, to really research heavily online. There's plenty of resources where you won't even have to necessarily pay a lawyer. You could probably find people from our own community that are citizens and are lawyers that can give them free consultations, or that can look into things for them. But to research obsessively, that's how I had a lot of success. Is I just get onto random places like Reddit. You know, it sounds dumb, but you know, there's a lot of people on Reddit that will talk about what they did X, Y, and Z, and they'll lay it out step by step. And or you can ask a question and you'll have plenty of people respond. So I recommend places like that where you can just ask for those answers. You can research, because there's so many people that there's a lot of people that might have the exact same situation. And if you literally type in your situation, let's say on Reddit, it'll pop right up. Somebody has already made a post, maybe. And if not, then you make the post, right? But you look for those answers. And I would tell those people those that if they can't get any legal status, because there are people unfortunately that can't, no matter how hard they try, the system's very closed off. That there's another option. You can always work, save money, invest it, and then when you've done it enough, you can go back to Mexico. And if I mean, it's a hard choice, but here's an option because the fees for Mexico, like for the universities, are actually pretty cheap. For example, like one of the top universities in Mexico, like UNAM, I looked this up. They only charge about 2 grand US dollars for a whole year of tuition. So honestly, if you just have no other option and you're like, I'm going to be stuck. I don't have any path forward. I don't have any legal status. I'm never going to get it. You could save up a lot of money and head down there and be able to fund your entire education, completely. And then, you would have an enormous advantage, when you think about it that way, right? You could even fund all the way up to a master's degree or even higher, so you just got to think outside the box. And there's so many directions you could take things, but you need a plan methodically. You need to have a bunch of contingency plans. I always had a contingency plans for everything. If A fails, well, what about B, C, and D? I would always think about things, even if they were really outlandish. I'm like the most random scenario ever, that could happen. I even had a plan if I got deported, what would I do? I sat there and I planned all that out completely. So I don't think some people that are like a little short sighted might think it's really extra or a waste of time, but it's it's not a waste of time. That's better to do that and sacrifice 30 minutes from your Netflix show than to not do those plans. Right. So that's what I recommend to people is just to really research and really plan and look at all the options because I literally had periods in my life where I thought the jig was up. I was like, I ain't got nothing going for me. I'm screwed. Right. And then literally it'd be 3 hours later. I'd be searching on the internet for 3 hours straight. And then I'd find the next diamond. I'm like, oh, this is, I latched onto that. That's my new hope right there. I can do this. Right. And there's nothing more empowering than being able to have a clear vision and you see a path forward that you found yourself. But that's right around the corner. A lot of people, don't just sit there and procrastinate and say, yeah, everything's outside of my control. You can make things be in your control. You just got to find a way to do it. So that's what I would say.
Juan, let just briefly here. I want to talk about your experience at an HBCU because I think your point of view or your purview would be important. So the person that is able to get their citizenship, now they're legal, they're eligible, and they can apply. If they did not consider an HBCU as part of their research, but now they're hearing your journey, what would they need to do, or what advice do you have for them? Or not, I'm sorry, that's not my question. My question is, what was your experience in the HBCU after you were accepted? Was it welcoming? Did you have support groups? The ratio to Mexican or Latin Americans on the campus. How did you get along there in that community?
It was very welcoming, and it was an excellent time. There was actually a surprising amount of international students at Alabama A&M, and a lot of them were actually from Latin America, like Ecuador, for example, or Colombia, Mexico, even. So you definitely had Hispanics there, but even without that, even without all that, what was surprising to me is, again, I went to a high school where there were some Black students, but it was mostly white students. And there was very little Mexicans. I remember maybe I was one of 10 in my graduating class. I don't really remember many other Mexicans at all. But the thing at Alabama A&M that I felt, even if there wasn't many Hispanics, let's say in a class or on the campus in general, is that I felt very comfortable and I felt like I blended in because for the first time in my life when I was there, I felt like I was not being judged for the color of my skin or my ethnicity. Everybody was very welcoming to me. They were very kind. Nobody ever said anything negative about the fact that I was Mexican. It's just that wasn't even something that was thought of. It wasn't even something that was even mentioned, or it's not even, I feel like sometimes it wasn't even perceived. It wasn't even a factor. That's how I felt. And so for the first time in my life, I it just felt like I was just more comfortable. I just had a weight lifted in a way because I was I'm not being penalized for this, and I'm always being penalized for that in some way or another outside of here. Right. So that's what I would want to say about Alabama A&M, and it was really good. And the honors program, I was in the honors program. It was really excellent, and I got to be with people that were, strive for excellence, and they were just really good people. Like the director, her name was Dr. Pitcher, and Dr. Or Mrs. Holloway too. There was two of them. They just provided a whole lot of resources, and they were very kind people. And I don't know, being in that environment with the honors program too, I recommend it because it makes you strive for excellence and makes you want to compete because you're sometimes the sum of the people around you. So if the people around you are, they're kicking ass, then you're going to want to do the same thing, right? So that'll influence you. But yeah, Alabama A&M was a great place, and it was the academic rigor. It was great. I mean, it's the same as any other university. Anybody that says differently is because they're just trying to down it because it's a historically Black university, and that's what I've run across time and again. And that's why I did that TikTok response, because I had that user just laughing distastefully as if it was a joke to go to an HBCU. I'm like, and I knew this. I knew this user to some degree. We had a falling out, but it's like I know this person doesn't even have a college education, so like to even be laughing, it was just silly to me. I'm like, why are you laughing? You don't even have a degree, you know?
Mhm. Those are the ones though. It's that's the biggest thing. And thank you so much. Juan, I want to thank you so much for posting your experience at an HBCU and answering a question that was intended to poke fun. And that's what it was. It was another way to tell you that, you're still not doing better. I mean, not only, are you Mexican American, now you're also choosing to go to an HB. That was intended to make you feel bad about your decision and anyone else, as if an HBCU is not on the same level as some of our other colleges or universities, and even junior colleges, community colleges.
Right.
That is just someone who is trying to find a way, on the simplest, smallest level, who is trying to find a way to make either themselves feel better, look better, or just jumping on this bandwagon right now. And that's all that is. There is no substance truly behind that. They can't give you numbers. If you were to ask them, prove to me, give me factual data that says that attending an HBCU does not guarantee you a quality education or quality of life after earning that degree. There's nothing. They cannot provide you any factual data. It's just a manner to try to get. It's baiting.
Yeah, that's all it is. I mean, it's just a bunch of BS. They can't provide any actual proof of anything. And then another thing is like, if you ask them a question, it's like, okay, well, if for example, let's say they were talking crap about Alabama A&M, it's like, if it's such a bad university, why is it accredited and the same as any other PWI? Would according to you, wouldn't they just be non-accredited then in that case, and they don't have a response to that?
And they will lose their accreditation. They will. You have to go through, even to be an accredited, whether you're on the level of college or university. A lot of these online schools, a lot of the technical schools, schools where you can earn a certification or a licensing, they have to go through a qualifications. You don't just get to say I'm accredited.
Right.
So they have to meet a standard. And a school who wants to be accredited, they expect for their student body to meet those levels. One can't happen without the other.
Absolutely.
So all of this foolishness about that school isn't better because of the skin tone of the people that are there. You're not going to be considered. You're not going to get an education. Foolishness. So thank you for not being bullied or ashamed to share your experience with Alabama A&M University in such a public manner, a way via TikTok and Instagram. I appreciate and thank you for doing that, because there's somebody out there who needs to hear this, who needs to be encouraged and not feel roadblocked because of their race, their skin color, their upbringing, whatever it is that they've been hearing all of their lives. They need to hear that you can go to school too. But this is what you're going to need to do it. There's scholarships. There are ways for you to accomplish your goals. Consider HBCUs, not just HBCUs, consider community colleges, consider junior colleges. There is a way for you to get and live the life that you deserve to live, that you've worked for. So I appreciate you for doing that. And what I want to do as we leave here and as we close, please share with the audience. One, we need to know what your published works are. We want to know that. Where can we find and follow you in your journey going forward, and any other things you want to give shout out, thank yous? Please, this is your opportunity.
Thank you. So for my science fiction book, it's called Golden Skies. You can get that on Amazon if you just type in Golden Skies. And if you type my first name after it, like Juan, it should pop right up. My first published piece, which if you guys want to know, like the experience of a undocumented immigrant and some of the things we go to, is called Letter from an Omniscient Racist. I published that. That was my first thing that I got published at Alabama A&M. And as far as my socials, if you want to add me on TikTok, I'm there as Arid American. You can find me there. That's my biggest platform. And on Instagram, I'm as Zapata the One. If you type that in, you can find me. But that is where I'm at. I just wanted to say shout out to Alabama A&M University. It's a really good time going there, and I was really happy I went there. And shout out to the honors program in particular, and Dr. Pitcher and Carla Holloway.
Look here, this man was in the honors program. You are not talking with subpar at all. And shouts out to your parents as well, your siblings. Your parents, I'm sure they are very proud of you. They did a good job, so shout out to them as well. And your brothers, they've got a very good, positive example, role model. And your family members, friends, you got you a leader here, if not an example on, the ways that you can keep from being discouraged and what determination really and truly is. So hats off to you. Thank you so much, Juan, for accepting my invitation. I greatly appreciate it. And I do hope those who get an opportunity to hear that they will be encouraged, and that they'll see that even with the obstacles that are out there, you can still achieve what's meant for you. Success for everyone looks different, and sometimes we have to take baby steps to get there, but it is definitely possible. But thank you again, and continued success to you, and keep doing what you do and encouraging others.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great interview. Thank you.
Anytime. We've come to the close of another episode of the End User Talk podcast. I hope that what you've heard today will leave you feeling empowered. Thank you for listening. And remember, every day's a training day.